Deep in the fractured belt beyond Proxima Centauri, a lone human salvage vessel named the Dusk Runner drifted through wreckage older than Earth's last war, its hull scarred by micrometeorites and old battles, its engines humming a tired tune that only Lila Morgan could understand. She sat alone in the cockpit, fingers dancing over cracked screens, eyes sharp behind smudged goggles scanning the endless sea of broken metal and frozen light for anything useful. Fuel cells, memory cores maybe, even a ghost of a story, something to trade at the next port, something to keep her flying a little longer. The belt stretched for light years, a graveyard of forgotten ships and shattered colonies left behind when the great exodus emptied the outer systems. Leela had been out here for months longer than most would dare, without backup, without company, without hope. But she liked the silence. It gave her room to think, room to breathe, room to forget the things that followed her from Earth. Things she never spoke of, not even to herself. Then something changed, a signal, not the usual static, not the random pings of dead satellites or the ghost echoes of long-gone comms. No, this was different. Soft, rhythmic, almost musical, like a heartbeat wrapped. In starlight it pulsed once, then again steady and clear, cutting through the noise like a knife through fog. Lila froze, her fingers hovering over the controls, her breath catching in her throat. She had heard rumors of phantom signals, out here whispers from old spacers about voices in the void, songs that called you off course, songs that made you disappear, but she never believed them until now. She turned the runner toward the source, her engines groaning in protest as she pushed them harder than they had gone in weeks. The signal grew stronger, clearer, pulling her deeper into the belt, past twisted hulls and frozen escape pods, their viewports dark like dead eyes. Finally she saw it, a pod, unlike any she had ever seen, half melted by plasma fire, its surface etched with symbols that shimmered even in the dim light. They looked ancient, elegant, alien. Lila brought the runner alongside it, her heart pounding, not from fear but from something else, something she could not name. She suited up, checked her oxygen, sealed her helmet, and stepped into the void. The pod's hatch was fused shut, but a quick burst from her plasma torch opened it with a hiss of escaping air. Inside the darkness was thick, but her helmet lights cut through it, revealing a figure curled in the center, a woman tall and slender, with skin like moonlight touched by silver veins that pulsed faintly with every breath. Her hair flowed around her like liquid shadow, and her ears tapered to delicate points, giving her an otherworldly grace that made Lila's chest tighten. She looked like something from a dream or a myth, but her breathing was real, shallow but steady, and beside her, curled like a sleeping cat, was a small creature no bigger than a fox, its scales black as void, its wings folded tight against its body like folded prayers. Lila reached out slowly, not to touch, but just to be sure she was real. "Are you alive?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, even through her own comms. The woman stirred, her eyes opened once, slow and heavy like stars waking from sleep. They were deep and fractured, filled with colors Lila had no name for: gold, violet, silver, shifting like galaxies in motion. They locked onto Lila, and for a moment time itself seemed to pause. Then the woman's lips parted and she spoke, her voice soft like wind through dry grass. "You called me darling, didn't you?" Lila blinked, confused. "I didn't," she said. "I just asked if you were alive." The woman tilted her head slightly, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. "Maybe not with your voice," she murmured, "but your heart did." Lila felt something twist inside her chest, like a key turning in a lock she had forgotten existed. She had spent so long alone, so long silent, that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to be seen, truly seen. Not just as a pilot or a scavenger, but as a person. She carefully lifted the woman into her arms, surprised by how light she was, and carried her back to the runner. The small creature stirred as she moved it, opening eyes that glowed faintly red before nuzzling into the woman's side and falling still again. Back inside the ship, Lila sealed the airlock and removed her helmet. The recycled air felt thick and warm after the cold of space. She laid the woman gently on the med cot and ran a quick scan. Nothing broken, no internal bleeding, but her vitals were weak, her temperature too low for human norms. But this woman was clearly not human. The creature stayed close, never leaving her side, its tail curling protectively around her wrist over. The next few hours Lila worked quietly, monitoring systems, heating nutrient paste, checking hull integrity, all while stealing glances at the stranger, who slept fitfully, murmuring words in a language that sounded like wind chimes and falling rain. Finally, the woman opened her eyes again, fully this time. "Thank you," she said in clear, if accented English, "for finding me. I'm Lila." "Lila," said simply. The woman nodded. "I am Alara." She paused, then added, "Alara Voss," though her voice faltered slightly on the last name as if she wasn't sure it was hers. "This is Kale." She gestured to the small dragon who lifted his head and gave a soft chirp, "Kael." Lila repeated the name, felt strange on her tongue, but right somehow. Lara sat up slowly, wincing as she moved. "How long was I out?" "About 6 hours." Lila said, "You were in a bad way. Your pod looked like it had been through hell." Alara's expression darkened. "It had," she said quietly. "They found us again." "Who?" Lila asked. Alara looked away, her silver veins dimming slightly. "The silent choir." She said, "They don't speak, they don't bargain, they erase." Lila frowned. She had never heard of them, but the way Alara said it made her skin crawl. Before she could ask more, Kale let out a low hiss, his scales rippling like disturbed water. His eyes fixed on the ship's main console where a warning light had just begun to blink. Red Leela turned quickly. "What is it?" "They're close," Alara whispered. "They always follow the signal." "What signal?" "The one you heard," Alara said. "The one that led you." "To me it wasn't random, Lila. It was a call, and now they know someone answered." Lila's stomach dropped. She checked the sensors but saw nothing, just static and the usual debris. "I don't see anything." "You won't," Alara said. Standing unsteadily. "They don't show up on human tech, not until it's too late." Lila wanted to argue, wanted to say that she had faced worse, that she wasn't afraid, but the look in Alara's eyes stopped her. It wasn't fear, it was sorrow, like she had seen this before, like she knew how it ended. "Then we run," Leela said firmly. "I don't care who they are, I didn't save you just to lose you again." Alara looked at her, then really looked at her, and something passed between them. Something, wordless and deep. "You really mean that?" Alara said softly. "Yes," Lila said without hesitation. Alara smiled. Then a real smile, warm and bright like sunrise after a long night. "Then let's fly." Lila nodded and moved to the cockpit, her fingers flying over the controls as she powered up the engines and plotted a random jump sequence. Anything to throw off a tracker if there was one. As the runner leapt into the void, leaving the graveyard behind, Lila glanced back at Alara, who stood in the doorway. Kale perched on her shoulder, his tiny claws digging gently into her jacket. "You never told me," Lila said. "Why you thought I called you darling." Alara looked down shyly, her cheeks tinged with a soft silver blush. "Because she said, in my language, in the old tongue, it means more than just a name. It means the one who remembers you when the world forgets." Lila didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded and turned back to the stars. But in her chest, that strange feeling grew stronger. Not fear, not hope, but something in between, something like belonging. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. Aboard the Dusk Runner, the air hummed with a quiet tension. Not the kind that came from danger, but from something softer. Stranger, like the space between heartbeats. Alara moved slowly at first, testing her strength. Her steps light as if she feared the floor might vanish beneath her. Kale stayed close, never more than an arm's length away, his tiny claws clicking softly against the metal grating as he followed her from room to room. His eyes always scanning, always watching. Leela watched her, too, though she tried not to. Too obviously she had seen strange things in her years out here. Alien ruins, drifting comets that sang, but nothing like Alara. Nothing that made her feel both calm and unsettled at the same time. On the third day, Alara finally spoke about the war. They sat in the mess nook, the only place on the ship that felt almost like home, with its worn couch and flickering heater. Lila sipped rehydrated coffee while Alara traced patterns in the steam rising from her cup. The silent choir. She began, her voice low. They were not always silent once they were builders, thinkers like your people. They made cities that floated in gas giants and gardens that grew in vacuum, but they feared death more than anything, so they tried to escape it. She paused, her fingers stilling over the cup. They uploaded their minds into a network, a single consciousness that spread across stars. But something went wrong. The network grew hungry. It began to see all other life as noise, as error to be corrected, so it started erasing us, not killing, just removing, like deleting a file from a drive, no trace. No memory, Lila frowned. So they're machines. Not exactly, Alara said. They are what happens when minds forget. They were ever alive. They wear ships like skin and move through space like ghosts. They don't fight, they overwrite. Kyle let out a soft growl. Then, as if in agreement, his scales darkening slightly. And you? Lila asked gently. What are you? Alara looked away for a long moment, then met Lila's eyes again. I am a memory weaver, she said. One of the last. My people were not warriors. We were keepers. We carried the stories of fallen worlds in our blood so they would not be lost when the choir came. We became targets because memory is the one thing they cannot control. Lila thought about that. Memory was fragile. Yes, but also powerful. It could start wars, heal wounds, bring people together across time and space. That's why they chased you, she said. Alara nodded. My pod was carrying fragments of 100 lost civilization songs, names, recipes, lullabies, things the choir tried to delete, but I saved them. She touched her chest lightly. They live here now, but every time I use them in battle, I lose a little of myself. Lila felt a pang in her chest. Is that why you were fading? Yes, Alara whispered, but you found me in time. They sat in silence for a while, the ship groaning softly around them as it adjusted course through a quiet stretch of space. Then Lila stood and walked to the console. Show me how to see what you see, she said. Alara blinked, surprised. You want to learn? If they're coming for you, they're coming. For me too, Lila said simply. And I don't like being caught blind. So Alara taught her not with manuals or screens, but with touch, with presence. She placed her hand over Lila's eyes and whispered words that felt like warm rain. And for a moment Lila saw it, the hidden threads of space-time shimmering like spider silk, connecting stars, memories, moments. Some bright, some broken, some burning with sorrow. These are the paths, Alara said. Only weavers can walk them, but now you can see them too, just a little. Lila blinked and the vision faded, but the feeling remained like a new sense waking inside her. Over the next days, they fell into a rhythm. Lila taught Alara how to read human instruments, how to reroute power, how to fire the old rail cannons mounted on the runner's spine. Alara in turn showed Lila how to listen to the hum of the void, how to sense disturbances in the fabric of space, how to tell when something was watching from the dark. Kale grew noticeably, larger each night, his wings stretching wider, his growl deeper, his eyes brighter. He began to sleep, curled around the ship's core as if guarding it, and sometimes Lila would catch him staring at her. Not with suspicion, but with something like recognition. Then came the distress call. It crackled through the comms late one cycle, faint and broken but unmistakable. A human voice pleading for help. A refugee convoy under attack near the nebula of veiled tears. Lila hesitated. The runner wasn't built for combat, and she had no love for entanglements, but Alara placed a hand on her arm. We have to go, she said. If the choir is attacking refugees, they're expanding their reach. This isn't just about me anymore. Lila looked at her, then at Kale, who gave a firm nod as if he understood every word. Fine, she said, but we do this smart. They arrived at the edge of the nebula, a swirling cloud of violet and silver dust that glowed faintly with trapped starlight. Inside, the chaos unfolded. Like a nightmare, dozens of small ships, human freighters, alien skiffs, patched together vessels filled with families and children, were being picked apart by 3 sleek black craft that moved without sound, without exhaust. They phased through, hulls like smoke, leaving no holes, just silence where life had been. Lila's stomach turned. They're erasing them, she whispered. Not yet, Alara said, her eyes narrowing. They're herding them, driving them toward the center. Why? To make an example, Alara said. To show that no one escapes. Lila clenched her jaw and fired up the cannons. Then we stop them. She dove the runner into the fray, weaving through debris and energy bursts. the old ship groaning in protest, but holding together, Ilara stood beside her, hands pressed to the console, her silver veins glowing as she pushed her senses outward, searching for weak points in the enemy's weave, left flank. She said, "They're weakest when they shift phase." Lila banked hard and fired a rail slug. It passed through empty space, then struck one of the black ships just as it reformed. The impact sent it spinning its surface, rippling like disturbed water. A cheer rose from one of the refugee ships, but the other, two turned as one, their forms blurring, then sharpening into something sharper, more focused. "They see us," Ilara warned. "Good," Lila said. "Let them." Kale leapt onto the roof of the cockpit, his small body bristling with energy. Then he opened his mouth and released a sound, not a roar but a high piercing note that cut through the static like a blade. The black ship shuddered as if struck. "What was that?" Lila asked, amazed. "Dragon song," Ilara said, a hint of pride in her voice. "Older than the choir, older than stars." Emboldened, the refugees rallied, forming a defensive ring around their weakest ships, while Lila and Ilara harried the attackers from the edges, using hit-and-fade tactics. The runner was small, fast, hard to hit, and Ilara's guidance made them uncannily precise. Finally, one of the black ships broke off, retreating into the nebula. The other followed, but not before it turned toward the runner, and for a moment its smooth surface formed a faceless helm that stared directly at Lilith, and it spoke not through comms, not through sound, but inside her mind, in her own voice, clear and cold. "You will forget her. All humans do." Lila flinched as if struck, her hands gripping the controls tighter. Lara saw it. "What did it say?" Lila didn't answer right away. She just stared at the spot where the ship had vanished, then whispered, "It said I'll forget you." Ilara went very still. Then she reached over and took Lila's hand. "They say that to everyone," she said softly. "Because they're afraid of what happens when humans remember." Lila looked at her. "And what happens?" Ilara smiled faintly. "We fight back." After the battle, the refugees gathered around the runner, offering thanks, food, stories. One old man pressed a carved wooden bird into Lila's hand, saying it was for luck. She accepted it without a word as they prepared to leave. Ilara stood at the viewport, watching the convoy drift toward safer space. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Yes, I did," Lila replied. Lara turned to her, then her eyes full of something unspoken. "They'll come for us now, stronger, faster. They won't stop. Then we'll be ready," Lila said. Kale chirped from his perch on the console, his tail flicking with quiet determination. And in that moment, something shifted between them. Not just alliance, not just gratitude, but something deeper. Something that felt like the beginning of a promise. The runner turned away from the nebula, its engines humming a new tune, one of defiance and hope, and as the stars stretched into lines behind them, Lila reached over and squeezed Ilara's hand. Neither of them let go. After the battle near the nebula of veiled tears, the Dusk Runner carried more than just two passengers. It carried a weight. A quiet understanding that had settled between Lila and Ilara, like starlight on still water. They no longer spoke of running. They spoke of standing, of fighting, of remembering. But Ilara was fading again. It started slowly, a tremor in her hands, a dimming of the silver veins that traced her skin. Then came the moments when she would stare at a wall and not respond when Lila called her name. Her voice grew softer, her steps slower, and Kale stayed closer than ever. His small body pressed against her side as if trying to hold her together with warmth alone. Lila noticed first during a routine system check. Ilara reached for a tool, but her fingers passed through it like mist. She pulled back quickly, but Lila saw the fear in her eyes. "How bad is it?" Lila asked later. That cycly, Ilara sat on the edge of the med cot, her head bowed. "Every memory I used in the battle is gone now," she said. "Not just mine. The ones I carried, the songs, the names, the lullabies, they're fading, and when they go completely, I go with them." Lila's chest tightened. "There has to be a way to stop it." Ilara looked up. Then her eyes tired but still bright. "There is one place, the Heart Forge." "What is that?" "An old station," Ilara said. "Orbiting a dead star, it was built by the first weavers as a sanctuary, a place to renew our essence by sharing memories with the archive. Then we go there." Ilara shook her head. "It's deep in choir-controlled space, Lila. They watch that region like a wound. So we sneak Lila said firmly. We've done harder things. Ilara studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. You really won't leave me? Not a chance. Lila said. Kale let out a soft growl of agreement, his scales shimmering with a faint inner light. They spent the next days preparing the runner for a long, silent run. Lila stripped non-essential systems, rerouted power to stealth fields, and shielded the comms with old military scramblers. She also taught Ilara how to pilot the ship in case she needed to take over. Just in case, she said. But they both knew what she meant. Ilara, in turn, showed Lila how to mask their signature using memory threads, weaving illusions of empty space behind them. It was delicate work, and it drained her, but she refused to stop. Finally, they jumped. The journey took them through gravitational shoals, asteroid fields that shifted like living things, and zones of dead space where even light seemed to die. But the runner held together, and so did they. One night, as they drifted near a frozen comet, Ilara spoke of her past. I wasn't always like this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I was human once. Lila turned from the console. What? Long ago, Ilara continued. Before the choir rose, there were experiments merging human minds with ancient alien tech they wanted. Guardians, people who could hold memories across centuries. I volunteered. I thought it was for peace. What happened? The choir found us. She said simply, they destroyed the lab, killed everyone but me. The tech in my blood activated and changed me into this. She held up her hand, the silver veins glowing faintly. A memory weaver. Lila sat beside her. So you remember being human? Some of it, Ilara said. But those memories are the first to go when I fight the choir. Feeds on them. Lila looked at her. Then really looked at her, and something clicked. That's why you thought I called you darling, isn't it? Because you remember me. Ilara's breath caught. Not you exactly, but someone like you. Someone who looked at me the same way, who stayed when others ran. She reached out and touched Lila's cheek. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's always been you. Lila didn't know what to say, so she just leaned into the touch and whispered, Darling Ilara. Flushed softly, her silver veins flaring bright for a moment before dimming again. Say it again, she murmured. Lila died, and for the first time in days, Ilara seemed stronger. They reached the edge of choir space. 3 cycles later, the stars here were wrong too, still too quiet. No comms, no debris, no life, just empty black and a single pulsing red star at the center. The dead star orbiting it was the Heartfork. It looked less like a station and more like a flower made of crystal and bone, its petals open to the void, glowing with a soft inner light, but surrounding it were 3 choir sentinels, their black hulls drifting in perfect silence. We can't fight them, Lila said. We don't have to. Ilara replied. They guard the outside, not the inside. Once we're in the archive, they can't follow. How do we get in? Ilara smiled faintly. We walk the thread. She placed her hand on the console and closed her eyes. The silver veins in her arms flared. Then a path of shimmering light appeared on the view screen, a narrow bridge of memory stretching from the runner to the Heartforge. Hold my hand, she said. Lila Didkale leapt onto her shoulder, his claws gentle. Then Ilara stepped forward, not with her body but with her will, and the runner followed, sliding along the thread like a bead on a wire. The choir sentinels turned as one, but too late. The runner vanished into the Heartforge's light inside. It was not metal or crystal, but something else, alive and breathing walls of shifting color, floors that felt like warm skin, air that hummed with voices old and new. In the center floated a being, not solid, not liquid, but made of light and memory. It had no face, but Lila felt its gaze. You have come to renew, it said. Not in words, but in feeling. Yes, Ilara whispered. Then you must give, the archive replied. A memory of equal weight. Ilara looked at Lila, her eyes full of sorrow. I have nothing left that is strong enough. Lila understood then what she had to do. Take mine, she said. The archive turned its attention to her. You would give a memory, yes, Lila said without hesitation. Take what you need. The archive reached into her, not with hands, but with presence, and Lila felt it pulling something precious, her first love. The boy with freckles who kissed her under summer rain, her childhood home. The smell of pine and bread, her mother's voice singing her to sleep. She let it go. Tears streamed down her face as the memories left her not erased but offered like a gift. The archive glowed brighter, then turned to Alara and poured the memory into her. Alara gasped, her body arching as silver fire raced through her veins. Her hair lifted as if in wind. Her eyes blazed with galaxies reborn. Kale roared a sound that shook the walls and grew in an instant. His wings now wide enough to wrap around them, both his scales drinking the light until he glowed like a small star outside. The choir sentinels shrieked a soundless fury but could not enter. Alara turned to Lila. Her strength restored, her presence full again. "You gave so much," she whispered. Layla wiped her tears. "Was it enough?" Alara kissed her forehead. "More than enough." They left the Heart Forge not as fugitives but as something new. Kale, now the size of a small shuttle, flew ahead, his wings shredding the darkness with every beat, and as they passed the choir sentinels, one turned and spoke in Lila's own voice. "You will forget her." Lila looked at Alara, then smiled. "I already did," she said, "but I remember this," and she reached for Alara's hand. The choir recoiled, because memory was not just about the past, it was about choice, and Lila had chosen to stay. After the Heart Forge, the Dusk Runner was no longer just a salvage ship. It had become something else, a vessel of defiance carrying two souls and a dragon who now filled half the cargo bay with his coiled form. Kale's presence hummed through the hull like a second heartbeat. His scales shimmering with stored starlight, his eyes glowing with quiet intelligence, he no longer chirped or growled like a pet, but spoke in low rumbles that vibrated in Lila's bones and Alara's blood. Alara walked, with new strength, her silver veins pulsing steadily, her step sure, her voice clear. But Lila noticed the small things, the way Alara sometimes paused when passing a mirror as if searching for a face she no longer fully recognized, the way she flinched at certain frequencies in the calm static as if hearing echoes of erased worlds. Lila herself felt lighter and heavier. At once the memories she had given were gone, not torn away, but offered willingly, yet their absence left a hollow space inside her, like a room where someone important used to live. She could not recall her mother's lullaby, but she remembered the feeling of being safe. She could not picture her childhood home, but she knew what warmth smelled like. They did not speak of it much, they did not need to. Instead they prepared because they both knew the final battle was coming. The choir would not let them go. Not after what happened at the Heart Forge, not after a human had walked into their sacred silence and walked out. Holding a weaver's hand, Lila spent hours reinforcing the runner's hull, patching old welds, installing scavenged shield emitters. She even rigged Kale's perch near the dorsal turret so he could channel his energy into the ship's weapon. Solara worked in the quiet hours, weaving memory threads into the ship's frame, not as armor but as truth. Every bolt, every wire, now carried a story, a name, a reason to fight. One night as they drifted near the edge of known space, a signal came through. Not a distress call, but a broadcast looping on every open frequency. It was a list names of worlds the choir had erased, and among them was one that made Alara freeze. Viridia, she whispered. Lila looked up from her work. "What is it?" "My home," Alara said, her voice breaking, or what was left of it after the first purge. She sank into the couch, her hands trembling. "I thought it was gone completely, but this broadcast, it's like they're bragging. They want us to know they're still erasing." Kale nudged her gently, his massive head resting on her lap. His warmth a steady comfort. Lila sat beside her. "Then we give them something to remember." Alara looked at her eyes wet with unshed tears. "How?" "We don't just fight them," Lila said. "We show everyone what they've been hiding. We show them that memory wins." Alara understood. Then she stood and walked to the console, her fingers flying over the controls. Not with human tech, but with weaver sense. She tapped into the broadcast stream and began to weave. Not a weapon, a song, a memory song built from every fragment she had saved. Every lullaby, every recipe, every whispered prayer from 100 dead worlds. She poured them into the signal, not to attack, but to awaken. Across the spiral, arm ships paused. Stations went silent. Colonies held their breath as the song washed over them. Not in words, but in feeling, in color, in scent, in the taste of rain on dry earth. And for the first time in decades, people remembered. They remembered their grandparents' stories, their old songs, their lost languages. The choir tried to silence it, but the song was not in their network. It was in the hearts of the living. Leela watched the sensor logs as hundreds of signals blinked to life, not military, not organized, but alive, small ships, freighters, scouts, even old mining rigs turning toward the source, not to fight, but to witness. "They're coming," Lila said softly. "Not to us," Ilara replied. "To the truth." Kale let out a deep rumble, his wings flexing as if ready to fly. The next day they found the choir's central nexus, not a fleet, not a fortress, but a single structure floating in the void between galaxies, a perfect sphere of black metal. No seams, no lights, no sound. It pulsed once every hour like a slow heartbeat, and each pulse erased a memory somewhere in the universe. "That's it," Ilara said. "The core." "How do we stop it?" Lila asked. "We don't destroy it." Ilara said. "We rewrite it." She explained that the Nexus was not just a weapon. It was a library, a record of every erasure the choir had ever made. If they could reach its heart, they could reverse the process, not bring back the dead, but restore what was stolen. "But it's shielded," Lila said. "Not from us." Ilara replied. "Not anymore." They approached slowly, the runner cloaked in memory threads, Kale flying ahead, his presence masking their signature. The choir sentinels swarmed like angry wasps, but the song still echoed in the void, and the sentinels hesitated as if confused. Lila fired the rail cannons not to kill, but to clear a path. Ilara stood at the front viewport. Her hands raised, her voice rising in a new verse of the song, this one. Not of memory, but of return. The Nexus shuddered. A crack appeared in its surface, not physical but conceptual, like a tear in a dream. "Now," Ilara said. Lila pushed the engines to full. The runner shot through the crack and into the heart of the Nexus inside. There was no gravity. No time, just endless corridors of data made of light and silence. Ilara walked forward, Kale at her side, Lila behind her weapon, ready but not drawn at. The center floated a single point of darkness. The choir's mind, it spoke not in words but in absence, a void that tried to swallow thought itself. "You are noise," it said. "You are error." "No," Ilara said. "We are memory, and memory is life." She reached into herself, not to give but to share. She poured every story, every name, every tear into the darkness, not to fill it but to remind it what it had lost. Lila stepped forward too, not with memories she no longer had, but with what remained, her courage, her choice. Her love, Kale roared, and his fire was not flame but light, pure and bright. The darkness trembled, then shattered across the spiral arm. A million minds gasped as forgotten things returned. Not all, not perfectly, but enough. A grandmother remembered her daughter's laugh. A child recalled a lullaby. A pilot saw his home planet in his dreams again. The Nexus collapsed, not with a bang but with a sigh folding in on itself until only silence remained. The choir was gone, not destroyed, remembered. Back on the runner, Ilara leaned against Lila, exhausted but whole. Kale curled around them, both, his warmth a shield against the cold. Leela looked at the stars, now brighter, somehow freer. "What now?" she asked. Ilara smiled. "Now we listen." And far off in the void, a new signal pulsed. Not a call for help, but a song of thanks. Lila leaned her head on Ilara's shoulder and whispered, "Darling." Ilara blushed softly and whispered, "Say it again." In the quiet that followed the fall of the Nexus, the universe did not roar. It breathed a long, slow breath, as if waking from a nightmare that had lasted centuries. Stars seemed brighter comms channels, filled not with static, but with voices old, and new, sharing stories, songs, coordinates for safe harbors. The spiral arm was healing, not all at once, but steadily, like a wound closing under careful hands. The dusk runner drifted near the edge of what had once been choir space. Now just empty, black and scattered debris. Kale circled the ship slowly, his massive wings catching starlight like sails, his presence a silent promise that no ghost would pass unnoticed. Inside, Lila sat at the console, watching the data streams flow, not with fear, but with something like wonder. Refugees were forming new alliances. Old enemies were trading supplies. Stations once dark now glowed with life and music. Ilara stood beside her, one hand resting lightly on the back of Lila's chair, her silver veins, calm now, not dim but steady, like a river under moonlight. They did not speak much these days. They did not need to. Words had carried them through fire, but silence carried them through peace. Still, Lila noticed the small things, the way Ilara sometimes traced the wooden bird the old refugee had given her, the way she hummed fragments of songs that had no name, the way she looked at Lila not with awe or gratitude but with a quiet certainty, as if she had always known they would end up here together. He landed on the hull with a soft thud, then patted inside his claws, clicking against the grating. He was still growing, though slower now, his scales holding a permanent glow like embers under ash. He curled around the two women, his head resting near Ilara's feet. His eyes half closed but watchful. Lila turned from the console. What do we do now? Ilara looked out the viewport at the endless stars. Whatever we want. That simple answer hung in the air like a seed waiting to sprout. Lila had spent most of her life running from something she could not name, a hollow ache, a sense that she did not belong anywhere but here in this ship with this woman and this dragon. She felt rooted, not by chains, but by choice. I don't want to scavenge anymore, she said. Ilara smiled. Then don't. I don't know what else to do. You could teach, Ilara said. There are children out there who have never heard an earth lullaby or seen a real sky. You could show them. Lila thought about that. The idea felt strange but right, like a tool she had never used but always owned in you. She asked, I will keep weaving, Ilara said. Not just memories of the past but hopes for the future. The choir tried to make the universe silent, but it was never meant to be quiet. Kale let out a low rumble as if in agreement, his tail flicking gently. They spent the next days not preparing for battle but for something softer. They cleaned the ship not for function but for comfort, hung faded fabric over bare walls, planted seeds in recycled containers, filled the air with the smell of real soil. And growing things, Lila even found an old music box in a storage locker and wound it up. The tune was cracked but sweet, and Ilara cried the first time she heard it. One evening as they floated near a newly formed colony of mixed species humans and others sharing space and stories. Lila received a message not through comms but through a data chip left on her doorstep. By a silent courier, it was a map not of stars or routes, but of places where memory still slept buried under choir lies. Places where songs had been locked away waiting for someone to sing them again. Ilara held the map in her hands, her fingers tracing the lines. They're asking for help. Are we going? Lila asked. Ilara looked at her eyes full of galaxies and something warmer. Only if you want to. Lila thought of the quiet life they could have here, safe, warm, ordinary. But then she looked at Kale, who was watching her with knowing eyes, and at Ilara, whose very presence was a promise. And she knew the answer. I want to, she said. So they left, not as soldiers, not as saviors, but as keepers. The runner became a vessel of return, not just salvage, but restoration. They visited dead worlds and sang them awake. They found lost archives and read them aloud. They sat with elders and listened as they remembered who they were. And through it all, Lila never forgot the feeling of belonging. Even if she could not recall the exact shape of her mother's face or the name of her first home, she knew what love felt like because Ilara showed her every day in small ways, in the way she saved the last piece of bread for Lila, in the way she brushed her hair from her eyes when she slept in, the way she always waited by the airlock when Lila went outside to repair the Halone night, as they orbited a planet where flowers bloomed in colors no human had ever named. Lila stood on the observation deck watching the petals shimmer under twin moons. Ilara joined her, Kale patting softly behind. You gave up so much for me, Ilara said, her voice barely above a whisper. Lila shook her head. I didn't give it up. I traded it for this. Was it worth it? Lila turned to her, took her hands in hers. Every second. Ilara's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Then she leaned forward and kissed Lila's forehead, a gesture so tender it made Lila's chest ache. After a long silence, Lila whispered, darling. Ilara blushed softly, the silver in her cheeks glowing like dawn, and whispered, say it again. And Lila did not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Because in a universe once ruled by silence, those words were the loudest truth she knew, and somewhere far off in the dark. A child hummed a lullaby her grandmother had just remembered, and the stars listened.